The doors did not open, they exploded. And the man who walked through them had white hair like frozen silk, amber eyes older than the kingdom itself, and a smile so calm it made grown men soil themselves where they stood. He looked around the room full of laughing nobles, tilted his head, and whispered 5 words that silenced an entire generation. "Where is my bride?" But let me take you back to the beginning. Let me show you how an entire kingdom signed its own death warrant by mocking a girl they should have been worshipping. They called her cursed. They spat at her shadow. They swore no man would ever claim her. But when the most feared vampire in 5 kingdoms walked through those gates, he did not come for them. He came for her. In the kingdom of Ashenmoor, there lived a girl named Vivian, and from the day she was born, a black cat with silver eyes followed her everywhere she went, to the well at dawn, to the market at noon, even to her bedside while she slept. In Ashenmoor, a black cat choosing you meant one thing: your soul already belonged to death. So nobody touched her, nobody loved her. She grew up beautiful, sharp-minded, and completely alone. One day the kingdom lord, a cruel man named Harlan Greymont, decided he had enough of the cursed girl bringing shame to his lands. He arranged a bride showing. 12 noble suitors from neighboring territories were invited to claim Vivian. Not out of kindness, he wanted her gone. Vivian stood in the great hall wearing a simple white dress her late mother had sewn before she passed. Bruno, the black cat, sat still as stone at her feet, and one by one, every single suitor looked at her, looked at that cat, and turned away. The last one, a heavy lord with wine-stained teeth, threw his goblet at her feet and spat, "I would rather marry a coffin than touch that cursed woman." The entire hall erupted in laughter. Vivian did not cry. She bent down, picked up Bruno, pressed her face into his dark fur, and whispered, "It is just us again, boy." But 500 miles south, in a fortress carved into the mouth of a dead volcano, someone already knew her name. His name was Dorian Ashworth, the Vampire King. White hair falling past his shoulders like frozen silk, amber eyes that had watched empires rise and crumble into dust. 1,000 years breathing on this earth, and every single one of those years written in blood. They said he once erased an entire noble bloodline because their great-grandfather had insulted his younger sister at a banquet 300 years prior. When the last body hit the floor, Dorian straightened his coat, looked around the silent room and said, "I do hope the next gathering has better hosts. That one was rather disappointing." Nobody crossed Dorian Ashworth, not twice, not even once if they had any sense left in their skulls. And tonight, a messenger had arrived at his gates carrying a single word that changed everything. A girl in Ashenmoor, a black cat with silver eyes, a kingdom mocking what they could not understand. Dorian set his wineglass down slowly. He looked at his war general and smiled that calm, terrifying smile that had ended entire kingdoms. "Prepare my carriage and bring my finest coat. If I am going to humble a kingdom before the sun rises, I might as well look magnificent doing it." Now, before I tell you what Dorian Ashworth did when he walked into that hall, and trust me, it is something you will never forget. If you are already hooked, if your heart is already racing just a little, do me one small favor. Hit that subscribe button right now and join this Vampire Love Stories family. It takes 1 second, but it means the world to me. And drop a comment telling me where you are watching from tonight. I want to know which corner of this beautiful world is falling into this story with me right now. Now here is my question for you. What do you think happens when the most feared vampire king in 5 kingdoms walks into a room full of people who just humiliated the one person he crossed mountains for? Stay right here. 3 days later, the gates of Ashenmoor shook. Not from wind, not from war drums, from the weight of who was walking through them. Dorian Ashworth arrived at nightfall. His carriage was pulled by 4 black horses with eyes like burning coal. 12 of his personal guard walked beside him, silent as shadows, each one a vampire older than the kingdom itself. And Dorian stepped out looking like death had dressed up for a wedding. A long black coat, tailored so perfectly it could have come straight off Fifth Avenue in New York City. White hair catching the moonlight like a crown made of winter. Lord Harlan Greymont was hosting a second feast that night, still celebrating how they had humiliated Vivian 3 days prior. The hall was full, music was playing, wine was flowing, laughter echoed off stone walls. Then the doors exploded inward. Not opened, exploded. Dorian walked through the dust and debris like he was entering his own living room, calm, smiling, hands clasped behind his back. His amber eyes swept the room slowly, taking in every frozen face, every dropped fork, every noble who had suddenly forgotten how to breathe. He spotted the heavy lord with wine-stained teeth first, the one who had thrown his goblet at Vivian, the one who said he would rather marry a coffin. Dorian tilted his head, walked directly to him, and before anyone could blink, he grabbed the man by his throat and lifted him 3 feet off the ground with one hand. The lord kicked and gasped, his face turned purple. Dorian leaned in close, still smiling, and whispered loud enough for the entire hall to hear. "You said you would rather marry a coffin, yes? That is wonderful news, friend, because I happen to have one right outside with your name freshly carved into it. Consider it a wedding gift from me to you. No need to thank me, truly. Your silence is gratitude enough." He tossed the man across the hall like a rag doll. The lord crashed through a banquet table, wine and roasted meat scattering everywhere. He did not get up. Nobody moved. Dorian straightened his coat, looked around the room with that calm, devastating smile, and said, "Good evening, everyone. I do apologize for the interruption. Well, actually, no, I do not apologize at all. I never liked apologies. They bore me. But I do appreciate your attention, so let us make this quick, shall we?" He turned slowly to Lord Harlan Greymont, who was gripping the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles had gone white. "You hosted a bride showing 3 days ago. You paraded a girl in front of these animals and let them mock her, let them throw things at her, let them call her cursed." Dorian paused, and his voice dropped low, cold and ancient. "That girl is mine, and every soul who laughed that night owes me a debt I intend to collect." The room was so silent you could hear the candle flames breathing. Then, from the shadows near the far wall, a soft sound, a low, steady purr. Bruno, the black cat, walked calmly through the frozen crowd, weaving between the legs of terrified nobles like they were furniture. He walked straight to Dorian, looked up at him, and sat at his feet. Dorian looked down at the cat. His entire expression changed. The coldness melted. He crouched down slowly, extended one hand, and Bruno pressed his head into Dorian's palm without hesitation. Dorian smiled. Not the terrifying smile, a real one. "Well now, you I like. You have been protecting her all this time, have you not, brave little soldier?" He stood, cradling Bruno against his chest with one arm, and turned back to the room. "Now, where is Vivian? And I suggest someone answers me before I lose what little patience I dressed up tonight." A servant girl near the back, trembling so badly she could barely stand, pointed toward a narrow corridor that led to the lower quarters, the place where they kept Vivian. Below the kitchens, below the storage rooms, below anything that mattered. They had put her underground like something to be ashamed of. Dorian's jaw tightened. Bruno hissed softly against his chest, as if the cat understood exactly what that meant. Dorian handed Bruno gently to his war general and said, "Hold him carefully. If a single hair on this cat is disturbed, I will hold you personally responsible, and you know what that means." The general, a vampire who had conquered entire cities, held that cat like it was made of glass. Dorian walked down the corridor alone. The stones were damp, The air smelled like mold and forgotten things. Each step he took echoed like a heartbeat, and at the very end, behind a wooden door with a rusted lock, he found her. Vivian was sitting on a thin mattress on the floor. No candle, no window, just darkness and the faint sound of her own breathing. Her white dress was wrinkled now, stained at the hem from the damp stone. Her dark hair hung around her face like a curtain she had pulled shut against the world. She did not look up when the door opened. She assumed it was another servant bringing stale bread or cold water, or worse, another lord come to mock her for sport. Then she heard his voice. "You are rather difficult to find. I have conquered kingdoms faster than it took me to locate this miserable little room." Her head snapped up. She saw him standing in the doorway, white hair catching the faint torchlight from the corridor behind him. Amber eyes looking at her not with pity, not with curiosity, but something she had never seen directed at her in her entire life. Recognition, like he already knew her, like he had always known her. "Who are you?" she whispered. Dorian stepped inside slowly. He removed his long coat and draped it around her shoulders without asking. It swallowed her small frame. It smelled like cedar and old rain and something ancient she could not name. "My name is Dorian Ashworth, and I have crossed 5 kingdoms, 3 rivers, and one particularly annoying mountain range to find you, so forgive me if I am a bit overdressed for the occasion." Vivian stared at him. Her lips parted, but no words came. Her hands gripped the edges of his coat instinctively, pulling it tighter around herself as if it was the first warmth she had felt in years. "Why?" she finally managed. "Why would you come for me? You do not know me." Dorian crouched down in front of her so their eyes were level. He studied her face for a long moment. Then he reached out and gently pushed a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers barely touched her skin, but she felt it everywhere. "I know that your cat has silver eyes. Do you know what that means, Vivian?" She shook her head slowly. "It means he is not just a cat. He is a guardian spirit. They appear once every 1,000 years, and they choose only one soul to protect, one soul in the entire world. They called you cursed because they were too ignorant, too small, too afraid to recognize what was standing right in front of them. That cat did not mark you for death, love. He marked you as sacred." Vivian's eyes filled with tears for the first time in years, not from sadness, from the overwhelming shock of being seen. Truly seen, by someone who did not flinch, who did not turn away. She whispered, "Everyone said I was broken." Dorian leaned closer. His voice dropped to something soft and private, meant only for her. "Then everyone was wrong, and I have made it my life's work to correct people who are wrong. Ask anyone upstairs, they will confirm." A small laugh escaped her lips, shaky and wet with tears, but real. The first real laugh in longer than she could remember. Dorian smiled. That real smile again, the one that had nothing to do with fear or power or centuries of blood. Just warmth. Just him. "Come with me," he said quietly. "I did not cross all those kingdoms just to crouch on this disgusting floor. My knees are ancient, Vivian. Have mercy." She took his hand. His skin was cool, but somehow it did not frighten her. It steadied her. He helped her to her feet and kept her hand wrapped in his as they walked back up that dark corridor together. When they emerged into the great hall, everything had changed. The nobles who had laughed 3 days ago were now kneeling, every single one of them. Lord Harlan Greymont was on his knees at the center of the room, forehead pressed to the stone floor, shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. Dorian's war general stepped forward and placed Bruno gently into Vivian's arms. The cat immediately began purring, pressing his face into her neck, his silver eyes closing in contentment. Dorian looked around the room slowly. He let the silence stretch, let them feel it. Then he spoke. "This woman you mocked, this woman you threw into a cellar like garbage, she carries the blessing of a guardian spirit, something none of your bloodlines have been worthy of for 10 generations, and you called her cursed." He paused, letting his words sink into their bones. I want every person in this room to remember this night. I want you to tell your children about it, and their children, and when they ask why the Ashworth name makes your family tremble, you will tell them exactly what you did and exactly what it cost you." He turned to Lord Harlan Greymont specifically. "As for you, your grandfather once refused to give shelter to my younger sister during a storm 40 years ago. She caught fever and nearly died. I told myself I would deal with your bloodline when the time was right." He smiled that cold smile again. "The time is right." Two of Dorian's guards stepped forward and seized Lord Harlan by the arms. Dorian continued casually, "Do not worry, I am not going to kill you. Death is too quick, too merciful. Instead, you will live a very long life watching everything you built crumble. Your lands now belong to Vivian. Your title is stripped. Your name will be erased from every record in Ashen Moor. You will die a nobody, Harlan, and nobody will remember you existed." Lord Harlan let out a broken sob, but Dorian had already turned away from him, dismissing him like an old receipt. He extended his arm to Vivian. "Shall we leave this miserable place, love? I have a fortress with actual windows and beds that do not smell like regret." Vivian looked at him, at this ancient, terrifying creature who had just dismantled an entire kingdom for her without breaking a sweat, who looked at her like she was the most valuable thing in any room, who made her laugh in a cellar when she had forgotten how. She took his arm. The journey back to Dorian's fortress took 4 days. They traveled through forest roads and mountain passes, stopping at villages where people whispered and pointed at the carriage carrying the Vampire King and his mysterious bride. On the second night, they stopped at a small inn. Vivian could not sleep. She sat by the window, Bruno curled in her lap, watching the moon. Dorian found her there. "You should rest," he said softly, leaning against the doorframe. "I cannot," she admitted. "I keep waiting to wake up, for this to be a dream, for you to realize you made a mistake." Dorian crossed the room slowly and sat beside her on the window bench. He was quiet for a moment, watching the moon with her. Then he said, "When I was turned, 1,000 years ago, I had a family. A mother who sang while she cooked, a father who taught me to ride horses, a younger sister who followed me everywhere like a little shadow. They were killed 3 days after I was turned, hunters who decided my family was guilty by association." Vivian turned to look at him. His face was calm, but his amber eyes held something old and heavy. "I spent 200 years hunting down every single person responsible, every son, every grandson, every bloodline that participated. I erased them all from existence, and when it was done, I felt nothing. Because revenge does not bring back what you lost, it just makes the silence louder." He looked at her then, really looked at her. "I built an empire after that. Armies, fortresses, fear. I made sure no one would ever have the power to take anything from me again. But I was alone, Vivian, for centuries, until a messenger told me about a girl with a guardian spirit who was being treated like dirt by people who could not recognize a miracle standing in front of them." He reached out and took her hand. "You are not a mistake. You are the first thing in 500 years that has made me feel something other than a monster." Vivian's breath caught. Bruno purred louder, as if agreeing. She whispered, "I do not know how to be what you need. I have never been enough for anyone." Dorian lifted her hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles. The gesture was soft, almost reverent. "You do not have to be anything other than exactly who you are. I did not cross 5 kingdoms for perfection, love. I crossed them for you." Tears slipped down Vivian's cheeks. She did not wipe them away. For the first time in her life, she did not feel ashamed of them. Dorian reached up and caught one tear on his thumb. He looked at it for a moment like it was something precious. "You know," he said softly, "in 1,000 years, I have made kings weep. I have made armies surrender. I have made entire nations tremble at my name. But this, watching you cry because someone finally chose you, this is the first time tears have meant something to me." Vivian laughed through her tears. "You are very dramatic. I am 1,000 years old, love. Drama is the only thing keeping me entertained at this point. She laughed again, harder this time. Bruno meowed in her lap as if he was laughing too. Dorian smiled and stood, offering his hand. Come, you need sleep, and I need to pretend I do not enjoy watching you smile this much. It is ruining my terrifying reputation. They reached Dorian's fortress 2 days later. It was carved into black volcanic rock, overlooking a vast silver lake. Vivian had never seen anything so grand in her entire life. There were gardens filled with night-blooming flowers, libraries stacked floor to ceiling with books older than most kingdoms, servants who bowed to her like she was already royalty. Bruno explored every corner like he owned the place, which, according to Dorian, he basically did now. That cat has better living quarters than some of my generals, Dorian muttered one evening, watching Bruno stretch across a velvet cushion near the fireplace. Vivian smiled. He deserves it. He protected me when no one else would. Dorian looked at her. His gaze softened. Then he will live like a king for the rest of his days. Consider it done. Weeks passed. Vivian began to feel something she had never felt before. Safety, belonging, home. Dorian showed her the fortress, taught it its secrets, introduced her to his closest allies. He treated her not as a guest, but as his equal. He asked her opinions, listened when she spoke, made her feel like her words actually mattered. And slowly, without either of them saying it out loud, they fell into a rhythm. Morning walks through the gardens, afternoon reading in the library, evening dinners where Dorian would tell stories of centuries past, and Vivian would laugh until her stomach hurt. One night, as they sat together on the balcony overlooking the silver lake, Dorian reached over and took her hand. I never thought I would feel this again, he said quietly. Contentment. Peace. I had forgotten what it tasted like. Vivian squeezed his hand. Neither did I. He turned to her, amber eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. I need you to know something, Vivian. I am not a good man. I have done terrible things, things that would make you run if you knew the full truth. But with you, I want to be better. You make me want to earn something I have never cared about earning before. What is that? She whispered. Forgiveness. She leaned over and pressed her forehead to his. You do not need to earn anything with me, Dorian. You already saved me. That is enough. He closed his eyes. For a moment, the ancient vampire who had conquered kingdoms looked like a man who had finally found rest. But peace does not last forever. 2 weeks later, a visitor arrived at the fortress. A woman named Selena, a vampire from Dorian's past. She was beautiful in a cold, sharp way. Dark hair, red lips, eyes like frozen emeralds. She had once been Dorian's ally, centuries ago. Some whispered she was more than that. Selena greeted Dorian with a smile that did not reach her eyes. So the rumors are true. The great Dorian Ashworth has taken a human bride. How quaint. Dorian's expression remained calm, but Vivian noticed his jaw tighten. Selena, I was not expecting you. Clearly. Selena's gaze slid to Vivian. She looked at her up and down like she was examining livestock. This is her, the cursed girl with the cat. Vivian straightened her spine. My name is Vivian. Selena smiled. Oh, she speaks. Adorable. That night, Vivian could not sleep. She wandered the halls and found herself near Dorian's study. The door was slightly open. Voices drifted out. She heard Selena speak. You cannot be serious, Dorian. A human? She is a liability. She will age. She will weaken. She will die. And then what? You will be alone again. Dorian's voice was cold. That is not your concern. Selena laughed softly. I know why you really want her. It is not love. It is that guardian spirit, the power it could give you if you bonded with its chosen one. Do not pretend you are above using her for what she carries. Vivian's heart stopped. She did not wait to hear Dorian's response. She ran. Vivian ran until her lungs burned, the long corridors of the fortress feeling like a maze designed to trap her. She ended up in the night gardens, collapsing against a marble bench. The scent of night-blooming jasmine, which had once felt like a sanctuary, now smelled like a lie. She looked at Bruno, who had followed her with a worried meow. "Is that all I am to him, boy?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Just a key to a lock? Just a way to get more power?" The words of her childhood echoed back to her. Cursed, broken, not enough. She had thought she had escaped the kingdom of Ashenmore, but she realized she had just traded one cage for another. One was made of stone and mockery, the other was made of velvet and ancient lies. Dorian found her an hour later. He did not run. He walked with that same measured, calm pace, his white hair shimmering under the moon. "Vivian," he said softly, "why are you out here in the cold?" She stood up, her eyes red and swimming with tears. He didn't even look at her. He looked through her. "I heard you," she choked out. "I heard what Selena said. Tell me the truth, Dorian. Do you love me, or do you just love the spirit that follows me?" Dorian stopped. His expression didn't shift into guilt or panic. Instead, his eyes darkened, a flash of that ancient predatory rage flickering in the amber. "You listened to the words of a woman who has spent 5 centuries trying to find a way to feel something other than boredom," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous low. "I don't care who she is," Selena cried. "She said it makes sense. Why would a king who has everything suddenly care for a girl from a cellar unless there was something he could use?" Dorian moved then. In a blur of speed, he was right in front of her. He didn't grab her, but he boxed her in against the marble bench, his presence overwhelming. "Selena lied to you, and I am going to deal with her. But right now, the only thing in this world that matters to me is whether you believe I crossed those kingdoms for your power or for your heart. If you believe it was for power, Vivian, then I have already lost you, and losing you would destroy me more than any army, any curse, any enemy ever has. I have lived 1,000 years. I have seen every kind of power. I have held the hearts of empires in my hand. If I wanted the power of a guardian spirit, I could have ripped it from you the moment I walked into that hall in Ashenmore. I would not have draped my coat around your shoulders. I would not have listened to you talk about your favorite books for 3 hours last Tuesday, and I certainly would not be feeling this agonizing pull in my chest just because you are looking at me with doubt." He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. "Selena does not understand love. She thinks the world is a game of chess where every piece has a use. But you are not a piece on a board, Vivian. You are the board. You are the game. You are the only thing in this entire wretched world that makes me want to put down my sword and just breathe." And she realized something painful, something important. Love is not just about being chosen. It is about choosing to trust, even when fear tells you to run. She had spent her entire life being rejected, so when doubt came, she instinctively believed the worst, because the worst was all she had ever known. Dorian had come for her, not for power. She knew it in her soul, the same way Bruno had known him that first night in the Great Hall. The guardian spirit had led him to her door, and a creature that could destroy entire kingdoms did not spend centuries alone and then suddenly risk everything for a power play. Vivian wanted to believe him. She desperately wanted to, but the seed of doubt had been planted. She pulled away from him, her voice a whisper. "I need time. Please, just give me time." Dorian looked at her, and for the first time, he looked truly hurt. Not the hurt of a man, but the hurt of a monster who had finally found a soul and feared it was slipping away. "As you wish," he said quietly. But Selena was not finished. She knew that as long as Vivian was by Dorian's side, she could never truly influence him again. The next night, while Dorian was attending to matters of state in the lower city, Selena struck. She didn't use a knife. She used a spell, an ancient siren's call that lured Vivian deep into the forbidden archives of the fortress. Once there, Selena revealed her true face. The mask of the elegant ally fell away, leaving a hungry, desperate creature. "Give me the spirit," Selena hissed, her eyes glowing a toxic green. "I can feel it pulsing inside you. The guardian spirit is not a blessing, girl. It is a battery, and I intend to drain you dry to achieve the immortality Dorian already possesses." Selena lunged, but as her claws reached for Vivian's throat, a streak of black fur launched through the air. Bruno didn't just scratch her. He let out a roar that sounded less like a cat and more like a lion, a shockwave of silver light exploding from his body. The force threw Selena back across the room, but she recovered quickly, pinning the cat to the floor with a wave of dark energy. "Now you will suffer," Selena sneered. The doors to the archives didn't just open, they vanished. They were torn from their hinges by a force so violent the entire wing of the fortress shook. Dorian stood there. He wasn't smiling this time. He wasn't joking. He looked like the end of the world. The air around him vibrated with a frequency that made the glass vials in the archive shatter. "Get your hands off my cat," he whispered. What followed was not a fight. It was an execution. Dorian moved faster than the eye could track. He grabbed Selena by the hair and slammed her into the stone wall with such force that the masonry cracked. He didn't stop. He struck her again and again, each blow sounding like a thunderclap. He wasn't just fighting her, he was erasing her. "You thought you could touch what is mine," he roared, his voice echoing like 1,000 ghosts. "You thought you could use the one thing in this world I actually love." He lifted her high, his eyes glowing a blinding amber. "I told you once, Selena, that I never forget a slight. You have spent centuries being a nuisance, but tonight you became a threat." With a single brutal snap, Dorian ended her existence. He didn't look at her body as it fell to the floor. He didn't even blink. He immediately dropped to his knees and scooped up Bruno, checking the cat for injuries with trembling hands. Dorian turned to Vivian, who was shaking, staring at the carnage. He walked to her, his face still splattered with a few drops of blood, but his eyes were full of a desperate, raw tenderness. "I am a monster, Vivian," he said, his voice breaking. "I am a brutal, violent, terrifying creature, and I will be that monster for the rest of eternity if it means you are safe. Please, tell me you still see me." Vivian didn't hesitate. She threw her arms around his neck, sobbing into his chest. She didn't care about the blood. She didn't care about the violence. She cared that this man, this king of shadows, would burn the entire world to the ground just to make sure she could sleep in peace. They stayed like that for a long time, the three of them, as the silence of the archives returned. Years passed. The fortress of Black Rock became a place of light. The libraries were open to the scholars of the land. Dorian and Vivian had a family. They were blessed with twins, a boy and a girl who had their father's white hair and their mother's kind heart. The children grew up knowing that their father was the most feared man in the world, but they also knew that he was the man who would spend hours on the floor playing with them and Bruno, who had grown old and fat, but remained the loyal guardian of the house. The lesson was carved into the stone of their garden gate for all to see. True value is not seen by the eyes of the crowd, but by the heart of the one who truly knows you. Vivian was never the cursed girl again. She was the queen of the Ashworth Empire, loved by a man who had waited 1,000 years just to find her. If this story touched your heart and made you believe in a love that defies all odds, then please do not leave me hanging. It takes only 1 second to subscribe, but that 1 second tells me that my stories matter to you. Don't be that viewer who enjoys the magic but walks away without supporting the hand that creates it. Subscribe now and join our Vampire Love Stories community. We are a family here, and there is always a place for you. Now, I want to hear from you. If you were in Vivian's shoes, would you have forgiven Dorian after what you heard, or would the doubt have been too strong? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one of them. And listen, if you loved this journey, you are not ready for what comes next. The next story is even more emotionally twisted, with a betrayal that will leave you breathless and a romance that burns hotter than a volcano. Click the image on your screen right now to watch it. You don't want to miss this one.